Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Late Night Show with Dr. Kojo. I'm your host, Kojo Software, checking in from sunny Los Angeles, California. I'm happy to have power. I haven't had power for the majority of the week, being at home with my parents in Augusta, Georgia. So I'm here. I have power, and we pushed the live stream, which is supposed to happen on Monday to Thursday today. And our guest is still going to be here with us, Dr. Gold. I'll introduce her once we get settled in. But we're going to be talking about 5 ways to deal with your feelings. So 5 ways to deal with your feelings. If you're watching on TikTok, you can comment. I'll do my best to get to these comments. I have to look on two screens. So my TikTokers, I haven't neglected y'all, but I'm still paying attention to what y'all are saying. So go ahead and let me know where you all are checking in from. Like I said, I'm checking in from what was a very beautiful and sunny day here in Los Angeles, California. Here's a small blubber about me, but if you've been here before, you know this stuff already. So go ahead and let me know what your name is, where you're checking in from. If you're watching on Facebook, when you type something, your name should automatically pop up. So you can just say Roger from Kansas City, Jessica or Marie from Idaho, wherever you're from. All right. See, the TikTokers are falling in. All right. And we're streaming live on Facebook. Both my pages on Facebook. We're streaming live on LinkedIn. Both my YouTube pages. We're moving from the main YouTube to the one dedicated for the late night show, but I wanted to make sure that we could get to everybody. So we're on both YouTube pages tonight, and we're also on Twitch, and we're not on X. I tried to get on X/Twitter. It was not working. So we're on, I guess, everywhere except for X. All right, Melissa from Quebec, Canada. Melissa, happy to have you. We have Lamina from East Bay, California. Lamina, I'm happy that you're here. Jennifer from Knoxville, Tennessee. Jennifer, thank you for joining. Ali, thank you so much. Okay, all right. So Ali, I'm gonna get sidetracked to talk about the game, but tighten up first and foremost. I'm a fan of you if you're a Titans fan. I'm happy we finally got the first win. I was getting nervous. I couldn't watch the game because I didn't have power at the house. But I was calling my brother in the corner of a very dark house. He was giving me updates. So we scored over 30 points for the first time in 3 years. So we're feeling good. Alexis, how are you doing? Alexis is the OG here. Jody from Michigan. Jody, happy to have you. Elin, if I have it wrong, please let me know, from Vancouver, Canada. And Melissa, of course, from Quebec. I think those are like on opposite sides. Go Lions. Go Lions. I have 2 Lions in my fantasy football team. Well, 3. Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery, and then Laporta. So I'm rooting for the Lions too, and they don't play the Titans. All right, so my TikTokers are also here. Thank you for being here. We're going to talk about 5 ways to deal with your feelings. I think that this is something that, we'll get into it because we have a special guest here, Dr. Jessie Gold. I'll introduce her in a second, but I wish that we learned this stuff in elementary school because I'm grown, more or less. I think I'm a kid sometimes, but I'm grown and I'm still learning how to deal with my emotions and deal with my feelings. And I feel like when you're able to master as best as you can your emotions, it allows you to, it sets you up for success in life. So this is a very important topic. And without further ado, our special guest tonight is Dr. Jessie Gold. She posts content all over social media. She's a psychiatry professor and a psychiatrist based in Tennessee. She has a book that is coming out this Tuesday, October the 8th. So I'll bring her on here so she can talk to us, talk about the book, and she's going to give us 5 ways to deal with our feelings. So Dr. Gold, happy to have you.
Hi. I saw a lot of football conversation, and I also saw someone from Knoxville. So my job is over the whole UT system, so that includes UT Knoxville. So I've been there 3 times since I started my job in February. So I'm all over that state.
So are you a fan of the Vols or?
I grew up a Gators fan because my dad worked at University of Florida and I was there for most of my life. And then I am now surrounded by the Vols. So it's definitely what I would say I like these days, because it would be pretty weird to be in my job and not say that. But Yeah, I watch them now.
They can't find out that you like the Gators. They can't find that out. Oh, it's too
Yeah.
late. They know now.
It's been, I think I said to them that I knew what it was like to live in towns like Knoxville because I grew up like in Gainesville and Jacksonville, and they're quite similar. Like it's just everyone
That
likes the
is true.
sports team. I got homecoming off of school, like University of Florida homecoming off of school because that was more important to the town.
It makes sense. Gainesville is huge, especially that Florida Georgia weekend in Jacksonville. Uh, that's the thing I miss about the South. I love football. I love football. That's the way to deal with your feelings, I guess. Football.
Watch some football. Yeah, I mean, they're probably dealing with their feelings in a different way playing football.
Yeah, yeah. It gets deep. And for the people who don't know who you are, can you introduce
Yeah.
yourself to
Yeah.
us?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you and like get to see everybody from all these different countries. It must be different times everywhere, which is also pretty cool. I'm Jessie Gold. I'm a psychiatrist. I really specialize in healthcare workers and college students primarily. I'm also the chief wellness officer for the University of Tennessee system over all 5 schools there. On social media, I'm at Dr. Jessie Gold, like I spell it Jessi. So across TikTok platform, I'm not as good as you. I'm more like on the artist formerly known as Twitter and on Instagram when I try. I've got a book you mentioned coming out. I'm like not at home, and the best thing I had, and you couldn't find yours either, is this like piece of paper that has what the cover looks like. But this is what the cover looks like. It's called How Do You Feel? One Doctor's Search for Humanity in Medicine. It's out on Tuesday. I spent 3.5 years writing it, and it's part memoir. And I'm like, it's crazy when you've done something for that long, and then you're like, I guess people will read it now. But I'm excited for people to, read it and get into it.
No, we're gonna read it. We're gonna dissect the book. We're gonna get this book, and I feel like, and also the way you post content is also needed. And I feel like social media is kind of shifting from the shorter videos. I still post those to videos that are like longer, and also people are reading again. I'm trying to learn how to read, and like not
Just
audiobooks, but
period,
the actual book.
learn how to read.
I'm trying. It's difficult. I'm
Yeah.
really trying.
Yeah.
And I see somebody has a question. So after we go through the 5 ways to deal with your feelings, then I will see if we can ask Dr. Gold a couple of questions. So we'll open it up
Yeah.
for
I love a
Q&A.
question.
We'll open it for
Just like,
Q&A.
expertise being really like college students and healthcare workers and things like that, but happy to do very many things and excited that all of you are here to hang out with us and talk about feelings.
Likewise. So you started writing the book 3 years ago. This is towards the tail end of the pandemic. Is that correct?
Like I really like my book deal was July 2021. So it was like still pretty in there. But it was better than 2020 when I was like actually, actively in it, which is where a lot of the feelings for me came from.
Okay, and what was your personal motivation to write this book? And also, like a lot of people in my community, anytime they hear psychiatrist, the first thing that comes to their mind is they're not gonna get time to talk, and is this gonna
Oh
be
yeah.
like refill on meds, boom, 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 and then like
That's
take
all
out.
I do. I don't say hi. I'm like, here's a drug. That's how I practice completely. No, but I get it. And I get a lot of people who've had that experience and then they come to me and they're kind of confused that it's not their experience. But so the book is part memoir, part patient narrative. All the patients are healthcare workers or healthcare worker adjacent. So a pre-med, a resident, a ER attend like an ER physician and a nurse who works in the ICU but is actually an onc nurse that gets moved over. It follows us for about 6 months. It takes place during the pandemic, but it's not a pandemic book. It's just that it's like the stressor that made everything worse.
Yeah.
And it looks at all the things that get in the way of taking care of yourself when you take care of other people, really. And I'm a patient. Basically, you see me doing my job, you see me burn out, you see me go to my therapist, and I do that because I think it's fair and true and human, but also it seems weird to be talking about how we need to take care of ourselves while doing our job if I don't also show you what it's like for me to struggle with that, because I'm not perfect at it either. And, you said people get kind of scared of psychiatry. I would hope that in reading something like this, that you'd be like, psychiatry is a little different than I thought. I think you can have people that are like what you're thinking, but I tried really hard within the context of like showing how I think about patients, showing how I do intake, showing how I do my job and think about medication, and showing how it's been for me to get treatment and stuff myself, to really like show a behind the scenes, honestly, like what is going on in my brain behind the scenes, like
Right.
the thoughts in my head, so that you're like, oh, they're not just like sitting there not thinking about something, or they're not just there to drug me. They're like asking me questions for a reason, or how come the first appointment is like this, and why did they ask me all these questions, and all this kind of stuff. Like I tried to weave that into the stories so you can kind of in an ideal world, it would destigmatize psychiatry in some capacity, but I know we have a lot of room to grow there, and it's a big hill to be climbing. But I think, I learned to practice psychotherapy a lot as part of my training, and the way I think about patients is inherently like informed by that. And I do that a lot as part of what I'm doing. And so you'll see my thought process, which won't feel like, hey, nice to meet you, here's a drug.
Right. It's actually personable, and they feel like they can see you. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I don't at all think our meds are good enough to assume that they can fix all problems. And in the same respect, like all of the data would say it's better if it's meds and therapy. And also, like, in the time period of the book, but this is the case now, it's the case all the time. The world is like constantly on fire, and we're just trying to support people through it. And I can't drug that out of you. Like if you're in an area affected by the hurricane, I can't give you drugs to make you feel better. Like I can maybe make it so it doesn't affect you as much, but the rest of it is stuff that you're going to have to like talk about or work through. And I'd love that if our drugs were that good, but they're not that good. And honestly, they're just like tools, another tool in the tool shed to say like, well, I feel a little better, I can actually talk about this stuff, or I'm not as keyed up, like I can focus, whatever it is. It helps, and I've seen meds do wonders, right? But in the same respect, like there's so much stuff that meds can't do.
Yeah. And when it comes to, it's interesting because you wrote this book over the span of 3 years, and the world is very different from when you started the book and when the book is coming out.
Yeah.
So when it comes to managing and dealing with your feelings, of course, I haven't got to the book yet, but like I know you have your thesis statement, like you have your overarching theme. What would you say is the first way for somebody who's watching this now in in an election year of all years, in a year with inflation and uncertainty, overstimulation from the social media and the internet? What's the first way on how we can deal with our feelings?
Actually ask yourself how you're feeling, right? So this sounds so simple, and so much of what I feel like I talk about in my job, or what people tell me from my own psychotherapy, sounds so simple that you're almost like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But it actually makes such a big difference. So my therapist said to me, like, Jesse, have you ever actually asked yourself that question? And I said, well, why would I do that? That's super silly. Like, I don't need to ask myself that question. Like, you ask me that question sometimes, and that's enough. But if we don't ask ourselves that question, we just function until our feelings get in the way. And we also don't notice when something is wrong. So if we're asking it regularly, then we can say, hey, like I was feeling one way, now I'm feeling this way. What does that mean? Or you can actually tell that, like, in your assessment of your feelings, if your sleep has changed, if your eating's changed, if your socializing has changed, whatever you want to check in with at the same time, you're better able to notice changes and notice them earlier, so that by the time you notice, it's not like you're 10 out of 10, super stressed out, and you like can't think about anything because there's too many feelings or there's too much going on. Like for me, I didn't notice I was burnt out until I was falling asleep every day after work. Like I'd go turn on a TV show just to kind of chill out, and I'd wake up 4 hours later and I'd be like, something's wrong with me, right? But like that's how I noticed. It wasn't like the subtle things that I would have noticed if I would have checked in with myself along the way. So I'm a big believer that we actually have to ask ourselves that question.
And we can practice by just starting now. It looks like one of your high school classmates is here.
That's so funny. Hi, Mel. I haven't seen you for forever, but I hope you're okay.
That should be a good feeling to see her.
That's so funny. Yeah, high school is a funny place, but
Yeah.
it's always nice to see people you haven't seen for a while.
So how are you feeling now? And then I guess no, ladies first. You go and then
How am I feeling?
Yeah.
I really like talking about stuff that makes a difference. So I've felt energized by a lot of conversations lately, even though it has felt exhausting too. Like being around people, having talks, all that stuff can feel exhausting, but inherently, like you don't get to help change culture unless you have the conversation. So I felt pretty energized in general. I think there's like a low lying hum of anxiety for me because like it's 3.5 years. It took a long time. You mentioned an election. It's not the easiest time to release a book. It's kind of pretty hard to break through in press and in sales and things like that. And so I'm trying to focus on the good, which is like helping people with it,
It's awesome. And I'll go ahead and say how I'm feeling, and then chat. You take this opportunity to also put in the comments if you like.
I would just add that okay and fine are not feelings. So everyone in there who's going to about answer this okay and fine, we're going to reject those answers because they're not actually feelings. And it's not because we're trying to tell you like there's anything wrong with your answers. It's just that like we say that so much because we're just like, hey, okay, like someone asked me, move on. I don't actually want to have this conversation. And in psychiatry, we call feelings like fine feelings I'm not expressing, which is like super true. So
like
just like, if you're gonna put something in the chat, you can put okay and fine, but I'll just judge you like a little tiny bit because I just did a rant about it.
So okay, fine, not allowed. All right. So how I'm feeling, I feel a couple of things. I feel hopeful, which I almost always do, but I feel a bit nervous and anxious and uncertain. And I feel like I'm fairly good at living in uncertainty, but when it impacts, like people that I love with the hurricane, and just friends and family just struggling. So sometimes I take on their emotions. I do feel not stressed, but somewhat scared, if that makes sense. I'm not stressed. Maybe I'm used to being anxious and scared and uncertain, but so somewhat stressed, but mainly a bit nervous, and also somebody put exhausted, somewhat exhausted, somewhat not physically, but somewhat drained. So, somewhat drained.
Like mentally exhausted.
Yeah, somewhat mentally exhausted.
Yeah.
From so many revolving things and trying to be in more than one place at the same time. Stressed, agitated, and anxious. Okay.
Thank you for sharing, Joy. That's a lot going on at once.
Yeah. Thank y'all for sharing. And Lucky, I'm going through perimenopause, fatigue, and burn.
Our bodies are so nice, aren't they? They like to give us extra fun on top of our life.
Right. Alexa says, nervous about responsibilities, exhausted from trying to date. Now the exhaustion from trying to date is a different type of exhaustion. Alexa, I feel the exhaustion from the words I just screamed.
Listen, I'm single and that is stressful. I have friends who totally love it, like meeting people and think it's fun. And then I have me who's like, I have one day at home. I just want to like hang out with someone I know and then go to sleep. So.
And just even going back to the whole dating thing, it is like after you get past a certain age, it's like you fear wasted time, and then like having to pour it out of you, and then it's a lot. And also I will say, now people might be like, toxic or whatever, but we go so fast in today's society that nobody has time to like slow down and like get to know somebody. Like we're going at 100 miles per hour. So like, are we building, genuine friendships and relationships? I ask myself that all the time. Procrastination phase could be some fatigue, depressed, feeling stuck. Yeah, finances, inflation. Yeah, and like I know I was on DoorDash today, and I'm like, hold up, this is getting too expensive. I need to stop DoorDashing. Let me stop DoorDashing. Why do I keep doing this to myself?
Do you want to cook instead? Those are your answers. Like, you got a choice.
I don't know how to cook, so
I'm not a very good cook either, because I feel like if I cook for one person, it's too much work.
That's how I feel. But someone's got to give at this point.
Yeah.
I'll figure out some quick meals that I can make independent of anybody else or a DoorDasher, and that should make me feel better.
You're a DoorDasher. That's the best. Thanks, Alexis.
Well, Alexis, it looks like this is working out. You have to have somebody who's like, I can't cook. I'm gonna need some type of food.
Yeah, me and Kojo keeping you in business.
Right. Yeah, we'll make sure you stay in business. Connected in my family and closest loved ones, even our passionate conversations. Feeling good about finally communicating in a reciprocal way with them. By hearing and hearing by. I like that. Krista, I agree. I think this is good. Cook for 6 people. Oh, wow. Okay, so we have some super cooks, and then we have the people who consume the food. It would just be over here.
Yeah.
Okay, so asking ourselves how we feel.
It's amazing, right? Well, like, what even just saying it out loud either does for yourself, but also in a group can do to make it just feel like instantly better, like more connected and less alone. Like, I'm a big believer, like, I mean, this is not necessarily a 5 thing, but that, like, being able to share these things can change the culture and like change workplace, and we just don't do it enough, because we do say okay or fine, or we do kind of blow off these conversations, but like an actual answer, and we don't all know each other, right, can make a big difference,
Yeah, and I mean, talk about workplace, being honest there is difficult sometimes. You don't have that space to be yourself, but I think starting those conversations in the workplace is hopefully, this book can get that going.
I hope so too. I see Joy yelling at us for not giving her enough advice. I'll give you a second one, okay? So beyond asking yourself how you're doing, actually, like, once you name it, which you just did, like sitting with the feeling and not trying to fix it right away. So I think that we very much, and I'm the same way, like, in our society, we're like, big feelings are scary. Like, if I have a feeling, it's going to disrupt my workday. It's going to disrupt my like flow of everything. It's going to just be like all consuming. And what we really need to do, and what I've learned, I'm not good at this either, let me just say that, is that like, we have a feeling, we name it, and sometimes you're just mad, and you're not mad and I'm going to figure out what to do about being mad. You're just mad for at least a little bit. And that's really hard, because we're like society, culture, whatever intersection, lots of reasons why this is true, but we like very much want it to just stop. Like, what can I do to make it stop? And then I can keep working, I can keep parenting, I can keep doing all of the 100 responsibilities I have to do. But actually, if we like just sit there with it for a second, it will like the way to fix it will come, but in part it is helpful and curative in itself to just give you the space to have that feeling.
I like that. And to play devil's advocate, what about the person who says, I can't relax, I can't sit there? Like, how do you deal with that?
Exposure. Like, it's not going to be awesome right away. It's like the first time you do it, you might have to just be like, I am mad. That's all I've got. Right. And that's okay. The first time I was mad, I still like and named it and sat with it. Like, I couldn't sit with it for very long. I don't like just sitting with anything. And so maybe the first time you can just name it, and maybe the next time you can name it and sit there for a second. And maybe after, like it's going to be a process. But once you start it, it'll be a little easier. It's just, you might have to sort of like slowly get into it, instead of just being like, I'm going to be super good at this right away, because you might like totally hate it,
No, it takes a while. And I think sitting there with the feeling comes before like talking to somebody about it, right? Just sitting there and checking in with yourself. Is that correct?
Yeah. Like,
Okay.
I see this like you want someone to listen and not suggest a way to fix it. So, like, we're like pretty bad at that, right? So, if someone asks you what's up and you tell them what's going on, they're going to tell you how to fix it right away. Or they're going to tell you their experience, how they fixed it, and then tell you how to fix it, right? Like, we're
Yeah.
not good at just listening because we want to help, and like we think helping is actually the doing, and it's not always the doing, right? Like, I'm a
Uh,
psychiatrist and therapists do the same thing. Like, I learned so much in training that like you diagnose it and then you treat it and people get better, right? But in therapy or other things, like, it's not like a pill, like it's not just going to change immediately. You go there because it's a space that someone listens, right? Like, you're getting more out of it than just the thing that fixes you, right? And I think that's really important.
And when you check in with yourself, like that right there, I think it can also help to prevent impulsivity and acting on that emotion before you could name it, because you just took some time to check it out with yourself and realize, oh, like you said, I was just mad. I wasn't mad at the person. I was just mad. And then, if we can just pause ourselves between the thought and the action, it can save us a lot of, grief, heartache, pain from whatever action comes after that.
Yeah,
Um,
and then I mean, which leads me to 3, which is that there aren't good or bad feelings.
mm,
So I don't know, society maybe told us which feelings are good or bad. I think we really want to be happy. Like, we just want to be happy. But most people are not happy all the time. Like, it's just an
yeah.
unreal expectation. Most people are like happy sometimes, sad sometimes, angry sometimes, anxious sometimes, right? Like, we have this like inside out like mix of emotions, right? Like, we don't just have one or the other, but we like have songs and we have shirts and we have all this stuff that's like, be happy. And so you think that the goal is being happy, and so when you have all the rest of the emotions, you go like, these are bad feelings, or these are feelings I'm not supposed to have, and you try really hard to not have them. And that judgment like adds an extra layer of stress. Like, you're calling yourself names for having feelings, right? And you need some self-compassion in those moments.
And when you label a feeling, because obviously when you label a feeling bad, it can lead to shame. But when you label a feeling good, can it be detrimental in an unexpected way?
I think if you label a feeling good and then it becomes hard to attain, then you think you're never good again.
Ah,
Like, in a perfectionist way. Like, part of the reason
yeah,
happiness as a goal is complicated is because it is mostly unrealistic. And so if you think you just want to be happy, you're never going to truly always be happy. And so you're going to be like, I'm bad at being happy. Like, there's something wrong with me. And then it becomes this whole like the weakness thing, as opposed to just like, actually, it's much more complicated than that. It has nothing to do with you, and it's not a judgment on you.
I really like that, and it's funny because I was thinking about the song "Pursuit of Happiness" by Kid Cudi. Are you familiar with that song?
I've
It's an
heard
older
it.
song.
You're
Uh,
cooler than me, but I've heard it.
oh no, it's well, everybody knew that song, but pretty much in the song he says, "I'm in pursuit of happiness." Um, like that's the theme of the song, that you're on the pursuit of happiness. But then as I got older, I still love the song, but I thought to myself, could the pursuit of happiness be why you're sad if you're trying to pursue an emotion or feeling that's not attainable?
I would think so, don't you? Like, what, aren't you going to be like constantly disappointed?
Right,
And there's
because
this
you're
whole,
always
if you want to quote another song that's much less cool, Miley Cyrus, The Climb, right? Like, inherently, we're not really actually thinking about the steps to get there. We're just kind of like, we're thinking about trying to get to the place. And then when we get there, we're still just trying to get to another place. And so, if
yeah,
happiness is that place, you never really stop to enjoy the steps along the way, right? Because why would
yeah.
you? You're not there yet.
Mm. And I like that a lot because it helps you put this, like, get this mindset of just being, like,
Yeah.
because if you're trying to chase something, then it can feel unattainable. But then I just am, like, whatever I am is okay, and learning how to sit there with that emotion. Okay. I still love that song, but I don't want to be chasing happiness.
I
It's
think
very
it's not
controversial to
like you
chase it.
have to judge music because I think
Yeah,
that it serves a purpose and it serves like even the emotion behind it, even if it's not the lyrics, can be really meaningful, right? But I think
yeah,
that like sometimes we get these messages without realizing it. And like one of the messages we get, I mean, literally, I like the song, but we literally have a song called Don't Worry, Be Happy, right? Why, like, shouldn't we, like, we should be allowed to worry, and if we sometimes are happy, that's also okay, right? And I like that song. It is really
uh-huh.
pleasant and really nice, but it
Yeah,
is inherently kind of invalidating.
yeah, yeah, yeah. If you think of it from that perspective, because telling you not to worry is leading to more worry. And what about okay, what about feeling numb? Uh, is it possible to just let numbness be numbness and not label it and just allow it to stay?
Yeah, so numbness is a feeling. I think we think that it means like absence of feeling, but I think it actually is a feeling, right? So sometimes it's like overwhelm, and so you don't feel anything because there's too many feelings. Sometimes it's disconnect, like you don't, like you're protecting yourself in some way, and so you feel numb, like you're kind of just removed from the situation. But I think like numbness has its own information to tell you, right? And so I don't know that you
Mhm.
have to necessarily say like this is problematic that I feel this way, you know?
Oh,
Yeah, I'm guessing you mean don't worry, be happy.
right. It can be helpful. And being worry and be happy at the same time. Yeah, you definitely can.
Yeah, so like I'm a much more nuanced, balanced thought person. Like if I were, I do like the dialectical behavioral therapy thought of like nothing is all good, all bad things are good and bad. Like, the same with
Mhm.
like you can worry and you can be happy and it can be the same thing that's causing
Yeah.
it, or it can be the same moment, and you don't have to be like one or the other. Like you can be both,
Mm, yeah. I think that shame that comes from labeling the emotions or categorizing it is very damaging. It tends to hold you back too.
Mhm.
Tends to hold you back, like an out of my experience. So, what would be the fourth way to say to deal with your emotions?
Yeah. So now that you've sat with it and you've named it and you didn't judge it, I will let you figure out what you would like to do to cope with it. But what you do is up to you. So there's no like perfect coping skill for each emotion. There's no perfect coping skill for like the universe. The best coping skill is the skill you will do. Right. So
There's no right or wrong here.
no, see, the problem is, and this comes from people like us, Kojo, like there is some evidence, right, that like things like mindfulness are good. And so we started recommending them a lot. And then people started doing them and hating it and thinking they were bad at coping, right? And inherently, they're not bad at coping. They just don't like mindfulness, right? There are lots of
Mhm.
ways to cope. I don't personally, I've tried mindfulness like 40 times. It doesn't work for me, but I like to journal. I keep a stress ball and stress putty on my desk. I like a therapy. I like a talking with friends. I like a dumb TV show, right? And they're different skills for different times. So, like, if you're acutely distressed in the moment, you might have to just like go take a cold shower, go for a run on the stairs, like punch a punching bag, right? Like whatever it is for you that you like need to get that energy out in, like you can pick something different in the acute moment in the long term, but like what you do should be what you'll actually do. Does that make sense?
No, it definitely does make sense. And I don't know, I'm being difficult and trying to play devil's advocate
You
here, but
can play devil's advocate. I think I'm keeping up. Am I doing okay?
no, no, you are, and the person who's like, all right, I gotta drink, I gotta get high, I
Yep.
have to gamble, I have to have sex, or the thing that we will
What
label
we might call
maladaptive,
not great coping skills. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So with that, how would you work with that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, the drive to do that is something, and understanding that is important, right? So people often use substances because they don't want to feel, or they like
Right.
the way that they feel when they're like that and they don't like the way that they feel otherwise, one of the two. And like the drive to do stuff like that, the understanding of it is important to being able to stop doing it, right?
Yeah.
And it's not to say like that's a horrible thing and I'm going to tell you it's the worst thing you've ever done. People turn to things that they find comfort in and they revert to them in times of stress, even if
Yeah.
they're not things they continually use. But in that sense, when I'm talking about a coping skill, I would say that wouldn't be my coping skill of choice, but it would be informative and it might be part of what's going on with you, right? Like in that
Right.
point, if you're choosing to do that stuff, your coping skills are actually part of the problem and not just a solution.
Right. As evidenced by what happens to you when you do that. Now, I think if you sit with your emotions, you normally are able to connect the dots that, oh, I felt this way, I did this, and
Mhm.
because I did this, it really set me behind. So if I can just not do that or replace it with something that's not as bad, or like you can kind of see where the drop off happened in terms
Yeah.
of wanting to make a better choice for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think it helps. I mean, I know plenty of patients who stopped using and they run all the time now. And it's a different thing that they do to sort of like get out that like need to sort of get a dopamine rush in some
Yeah.
capacity. But, if we're going to use a judgment word in some capacity, it's a bit of a healthier way to get a dopamine rush. Right. And so they've learned to do that as a way to cope, to not deal with those impulses. Right.
Yeah. Okay. And there's a lot of shame around that, and being able to navigate past that could be the breakthrough for a lot of people.
We love a shame and guilt. We have so much shame and guilt. Like
Yeah.
that stuff we don't name enough, but consumes us in so many ways. So like, there's a whole bit in the book about like I had a lot of guilt in the pandemic being a frontline worker who was behind a computer. Right. I spent the
Oh,
entire pandemic behind a computer because I was non-essential. Right. And I'm taking care of healthcare workers who are on the front line and all day, like at risk. And I'm thinking like I'm helping them and I'm holding them up, but like I'm not at risk. Like there's privilege in that. And I'm guilty that I'm not, because we were taught to always like, run towards the fire, if you're going to use a metaphor. But like inherently, I had so much guilt about that I like did more. Like I did every talk, every
yeah.
outreach, everything I could possibly do, because I was like, I need to make up for it. And that burnt me out in its own way, because I was like trying to get over the guilt by doing more, thinking that like somehow magically, if I just did that much, if I just kept
Yeah.
doing it, like somehow I would solve the problem, right? Which doesn't like logically make sense, but it inherently was just a reaction to trying to deal with guilt that I didn't define or name until like probably a year later.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. I remember during the pandemic, that's when I left to come to LA and start to put 110% into the social media. Not that I wasn't doing it before, but it became the main thing, and pushing myself to just give more than what I had, or just give as much as I could, because that guilt of feeling like, okay, like they needed you, or like you chose yourself over them, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah, it takes a while. It's like a delayed hit where you're like, hold up, did I need to be that tired all the time? Did I need to push myself to the limit?
Yeah.
Um, hmm. And when it comes to grief,
Yeah.
does the book talk about grief and dealing with grief?
Yeah, I mean, some not in an extent that like, it really is the whole bit of it, but the pandemic is like this compounded trauma plus grief situation that a
Yeah.
lot of us aren't dealing with and didn't deal with and didn't know how to deal with. I talk a little bit about like how being a healthcare worker, when somebody you're taking care of dies, you grieve, but you feel like you're not, again, the guilt, like you feel like you're not supposed to grieve because they weren't your family member and you somehow don't deserve to. I talk to a lot of healthcare workers about how they like whether they chose to go to patients' funerals and things like that, and how they made those decisions. And some of them have made those decisions because it was like the way to sort of close the book and complete the circle for them. In psychiatry, it's complicated. Like, I don't know that I could do something like that, because it would be like, I don't know, we're kind of like hidden in some way. But
Yeah.
guilt and grief is one of those emotions that, like trauma, doesn't have like a very well defined timeline, right? Like, it can come when it wants, it comes unexpectedly, it comes when you think you're done with it, and then you judge yourself for it, right? Like, you sort of go, what the heck, it was this long ago, I should be over it, right? But like, there's no should, right? Like, what does over it mean? Like,
Mhm.
you loved the person, you should be over it never. Like, whatever that looks like for you is what it looks like for you, you know?
Yeah. And I have a question before we get to the fifth one. I'm curious because this is the cool thing about doing work outside of the office, because you
Yeah.
get to kind of push the limit in ways you really can't do within the office. Because you have this book, and then you put this book out to the world, and people are using this book, and then they're learning from it, and they're like, okay, wow, Dr. Gold's book has allowed me to manage my feelings and emotions, and I'm getting to places where I've never gotten to. And then the feeling that you feel for helping them out with their feelings, there's I don't know what the word is, but there's a special thing there.
Yeah.
And at least in the social media world, that connection, it sometimes becomes parasocial,
Yeah.
which,
Yeah.
if you have the equivalent in the office, we can't do that because we have to have boundaries. But something cool happens when they see that you're human,
Yeah.
and you see that they see that you're human, and you just sit
Yeah.
there, and there's that lack of judgment, and you're working through something. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's so interesting. So, like, I self-disclose pretty openly on social, but in a one-on-one patient setting, I only use it where it makes sense. So I won't, like, in a session with a patient, be like, if I'm prescribing Wellbutrin, I won't be like, high five, I take that too, right? Like, if it makes sense, like, it comes up, right? Like, it wouldn't do it just to do it.
Uh-huh.
And sometimes they bring it in because they read it, or they saw my social, or like something that I wrote. And then they'll say, like, hey, Dr. Gold, I read this piece that you wrote about being burnt out during the pandemic. Can we talk about that? Or, it really resonated with me, I didn't know that you talked about stuff like that. And like, then I'll talk about it. And so it's
Mm.
almost like I have, like, as you kind of said, like, different sort of boundaries and thoughts about how to deal with talking about myself and the things that I disclose, despite them being like openly available to most people. It's like, in this setting, this is how I think about it. In this setting, this is how I think about it. But inherently, like, when I share, there's a thing called self-disclosure reciprocity, which is like, if I share, you probably want to share, and you feel closer to me and want to share too, right? Like, it's just not, I share and then it's just out there, and then you just are like, well, that was weird, why did she say that? Right? Like, instead,
Right.
you're like, oh, that was great, like, I think I should maybe say something too, and I feel safer and more comfortable and more like trusted in that space. And it's super interesting because in our fields, like mental health fields, like, are really hate self-disclosure, but they should have taught us to use
Yeah.
it thoughtfully instead of just like telling us to never use it, because it does make a difference in the right setting.
Right. And I do that as well. And I feel like I just kind of started doing that. Like, just when appropriate, I'm like, hold up, I think it makes sense to, tell them this or that. Or of course, I had my book, um, You Already Won, the one I wrote in 2019, where I talked about having ADHD. So then it was like a known thing. And like, that was like my hurdle to get over. Like, I had to like put it in the book, and then like, all right, let the world know so that I can like not be ashamed of it and like own it, and all the other things. But there's this connection that, like, when they know that and then that they know that you all
They know. That was. Do you ever watch Friends?
oh, it's been a while.
Oh, there's this like whole thing where it's like, they know that you don't. There's like a 10-episode thing about like people hooking up, and that just reminded me of that. So sorry, my brain does pop culture references without needing to continue.
So I haven't seen Friends, but like all the way. I'm gonna have to binge that show one day. I'll add it right next to Breaking Bad of the shows that I have to watch. I gotta add that. But yeah, being able to put like a book out and to talk about an emotion, and highlighted with your story, it brings you to the level of the patient, and I feel like that's sometimes half the battle.
Yeah.
Like that's a huge thing. Maybe not allowed sometimes, but like it's
Yeah, in so many ways, like it's not even not allowed. Like we're almost told to like not be, right? Like I can think of and again for the book, I talked to so many healthcare workers who told me they learned about emotions through codes or like something like someone died and then nobody reacted. And so they learned that they're just not supposed to react, right? And not only do we not react, like people go and they eat lunch right after, right? And then that's like what we do. But nobody goes, well, someone just died. Like, why are we going to lunch? Like, that's weird, right?
yeah,
And so they all learn, like, as trainees and students, like, they watch around them and nobody reacts. So then you go, I guess when people die, I'm just not supposed to react. And so we basically learn that that's what's appropriate, not
yeah,
reacting. And inherently, like I've seen people get negative feedback for having emotions and like for being more emotional than someone else, right? And so you're like, in the same sense that we're like modeling and sort of
yeah,
encouraging not feeling, we're also discouraging too much feeling, like oh, so and so they're like too close to the patients, or I got feedback
yeah.
that I was too nice to nurses. And
Oh,
like someone
wow.
actually wrote that down, which is like I to this day, like when I read that, I was like, can you write stuff like that down? Like that's a bizarre thing to say, but
Wow.
like inherently, that's they meant like I didn't know my place, and I was, right, like I was, and I was like,
Mm,
uh, well, I don't even know what to say to this information. But that stuff, if you like process it when you're young,
wow.
like what you learn is like, here's all the things I'm not supposed to do. Here's all the things that will make me unsuccessful. Like I need to change to be this person.
Yeah,
And that person is an unfeeling robot who's somehow magically not affected by a really hard workplace. And I think that's true in a lot of workplaces. Healthcare is just a particularly weirdly bad one.
most
Like,
most
but
definitely healthcare.
you
Yeah,
were told you were too friendly to front office staff. Yeah, I feel like Dr. Ranger and I have a lot in common because I'm reading a lot of what you're saying, and I'm just thinking that we've had a lot of similar experiences. But yeah, I don't even know what that means. Like you said hi, you knew you like for me, I was like, is it bad that I know their names? Like where's the problem?
I mean, it's frustrating because it's kind of like when a kid gets to like 14, 15, and they can start to critically think, and then they see that their parents are telling them one thing but they're not doing it. So it's
Mhm.
like, all right, why would I listen to you? Like your words carry no weight because you're doing one thing but you're telling me to do this other thing. So
Yeah.
then it's same thing in the office. If you're a robot telling somebody to like feel and like feel your emotions and like check in with yourself, but you're delivering it in such a stoic way where it's like boom, boom, boom. Then they're like, you're not even a real person.
Yeah.
So why would I listen to you? Like I have never seen you feel emotion.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we have to work on while being mindful of the boundaries. But I feel like we're already mindful of the boundaries. We just don't
Yeah.
show emotion.
Yeah. Totally.
No joy for you.
Listen, before I tell you a fifth, I'm curious if you have another one because I told you I was going to put you on the spot to
Hmm.
piggyback on and see if you had anything before I added anything.
The fifth one, well, I can give a 4B.
A 4B.
A 4B. I can give a 4B. So the fourth one was figure out how you want to cope with emotion. There's no right or wrong.
Oh,
4B.
moments of essence. Thank you for saying that. That's like my goal of that, like writing the book in all of the things
Mm,
I do is like I always think patients like it more. And I actually think that as a culture in healthcare, we like it more too. But like for some reason, we were taught you don't. And so it's helpful for me to see that as feedback. But I also think it's important for other people to see that because they're taught one thing. And I actually think patients want like a
yeah,
human and an empath. They
yeah,
don't want a robot,
yeah. No, I've almost always seen that they want somebody with emotion. Because like if you are vulnerable, then they're like, okay, or if they can see that you're human,
Yep.
like if they sense that you're going through the motions, and it's like, okay, all right. You're waiting for like the next person to come. You slept, you ate. Okay, all right, cool. Next person, like that's a common. I saw it when I first started on social media. I still see it in the DMs. Like, no, you won't talk to me. I'm just another number.
Yeah.
And
then they end up in my office because of that, right? Like because a doctor didn't care or didn't listen, and then maybe they had emotions, and then they said, hey, go to the doctor, go see the psych, right? Or they end up in my office because the person was mean and that affected them and then affected their mental health. But either way, they're coming because of that encounter that could have been done much better,
Right. And the earlier that you intervene, the better I feel like the patient would do. This platform is the most.
Just with Dr. Kojo. Yeah, I mean, he brings it out. It's probably, I don't know, there's a lot of like really clean background comforting stuff going on back. Whatever's going on back there is just making me like, I'm like, it's all like black and white and clean. Your couch is white. I couldn't do that. That stresses me out.
It's a safe space. I don't know why I chose white, especially with having a dog. I don't know why I chose white.
Listen, I can't do it. Like if there's one scratch, I'll be like, this is ruined. And it's like obscene because couches are so expensive. So I can't do it because I get too anxious. But I respect. Now I think I need, that's my last name's Gold. Now I think I need a periodic table AU behind me to be cool.
No, you definitely need an AU. And I know they have that somewhere. You definitely need an AU because it would make sense. It would go with the whole aesthetic. And they can have like the gold, like the details. Like I like the little details.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm making you give me a 4B, but I keep distracting by looking at your background.
I have a 4B. So my 4B is all right. Emotions. Credit for might be redundant, but give yourself credit for feeling. Because it might be mainly a guy thing, but I don't think we really feel, or like we're used to. Like it's funny because like I guess in the office, like I can be more of a human, but like in life, like to-do list, I'll take care of this and that, and then next thing, and that's how I've learned to be productive. Like boom, 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 just get the thing done. So when you pause to figure out how you're feeling, a lot of times the shame that you feel might make you not want to feel, or now we have to get high, or now we have to do something else to just not feel again because like I don't like the way this feels. I have to sit here with this emotion. So I think you have to give yourself credit for feeling because it gives you momentum, and momentum is so important, especially for me. If I have something that I'm doing, and I had, for example, I went to guitar practice today, and my teacher said, "This is the best you've ever played." And I played so much this past week. So I'm like, all right, now I'm excited to get back and to play again because I can see that I'm making progress. So when you have like some tangible evidence of, okay, I'm feeling better, I think that is going to help give you more, momentum to start feeling more. And most importantly, to tell the truth. Because if you can tell the truth to yourself, you can tell the truth to other people. And that's something I don't see a lot of people doing. I think that's probably what made me gravitate towards comedy, because the day-to-day world is like a lot of masking. Like if you ask somebody how they're feeling and they actually tell you, oh, well, my car got hit, you'd be like, oh, I was just kidding. Like, I didn't want you to tell me the truth. I just want you to say I'm fine. And like, we're at a Wendy's drive-through, so I think being honest with your emotions and having some momentum with that, sometimes somebody has to start and then keep that going.
Yeah. And it like, vulnerability is like like it's emotional exposure and risk, and like all of the words that define it sound miserable. Like there's like nothing. It's like people might not like it. You might be at risk for doing it. You might not, all of the things make you sound like why on earth would I possibly do that? But like when you try, or when you are, people are much more likely to do the same, and the culture is much more supportive. Supportive cultures, like especially in workplaces, are much more likely to not be like places you burn out, right? Like you'll feel
Yeah.
like valued and seen and supported. And those are like, that's really like essential, but we don't see it like that. We see it as scary. And like a lot of times, I think when people think I'm talking about vulnerability, I expect people to do like what we do and talk about our diagnoses and our treatments, right? But inherently, like somebody has to do that. We have to do that. We'll change the narrative for us, but like you don't have to do that. You just have to say it's really weird we went from this code to lunch, or like it wasn't like work and life is really hard to balance, or sometimes my emails piss me off. Like whatever it is, right? Like some of these things that are really like quiet things that we just don't say out loud like are
Mhm.
really important to try to say out loud, and that will change culture just as much as like me
Yeah.
and you like openly talking about our treatments and diagnoses, right?
Yeah.
Like we need that, but we also just need these like subtle reinforcements and changes and like awareness that you're not alone in your reaction to whatever's going on, you know?
Yeah. Just that plus pausing and like taking the time to feel what you're feeling, I think it's so helpful because when you figure out what you're actually feeling, it gives you a lot of insight into what to do next, at least for me. Because then I can realize, oh wow, I'm feeling stuck because I'm afraid. I'm actually afraid of this person's opinion of me, or I'm afraid of what will happen if I do this, if I'm going to lose these people in my life. Like I'm afraid of what's going to happen if I start to be who I actually am in this environment because I have all these people here. And then the alternative is, I tell the truth and then now you're lonely. So when you can figure out like the actual thing that's making you stuck, and then you also let go of the need for, like I have to have them around me, or I have to be this way for those people to accept me. It gets you closer to environments where you can tell the truth, which is really hard. Telling the truth, telling the truth. Laugh. That's funny. When you figure out your
Yep.
feelings, you can figure out your needs. Right. And sometimes you don't know what boundaries you want to set for yourself. You just know that it's like, okay, like I feel bad, but you don't know why you feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of know why, but you know.
Yeah, so like an early burnout warning sign for me is I get email anger. Like if someone sends
Uh,
me another email, I'm gonna like take my computer and I'm gonna throw it across the room. And it's like a very strong reaction. And I didn't really like notice it for a while. And I was like, gosh, emails just sometimes make me mad. And I sat with that and I was like, well, I'm mad, but also why am I mad? And I realized that email usually is full of asks, right? Like nobody's writing me an email to be like, hey, Jesse, I love you. You're really good at your job. They're writing me an email with some other task for a job, some other ask about like writing or work or a paper. Like it's a to-do list. And when
yeah.
people are asking you what like more to do, or like you cleared it and then you get more to do, inherently, if you've got nothing left, you're going to be mad about it, right? Like
Yeah.
your reaction isn't to be like, awesome, I'm so glad I got another email. It's to be like, stop sending, right? Like, and you're just really defensive. And I had to understand like where that was coming from, because I was just like, what's the deal with this like 0 to 10 on this email situation? And I really like sat with it, figured it out. And like when you said sometimes you're just upset and you don't know why, like that's what that was. Like I was just like, this is deferred, or there's something going on with me about emails. And like I really was like, there's much more to it. And it helped me realize like when I feel overwhelmed or like I'm doing too much, like more asks really just don't work. Like I have to take a space or a like break from them, or go, thank you for the ask, I'll get back to you eventually, like whatever it is, where I'm not just like angry or completely avoid it, right?
Oh, that's good to know because I've been having a lot of email anger as of late.
Yeah. And that includes like, other inboxes too, right? Like you're great and so nice on social and stuff, but I'm sure sometimes like a big social media inbox is the same, and I'm sure like a patient inbox is the same, right? Like there's other places that messages come.
Yeah, and I have an example today, and then I'll let you get to your fifth one, and we'll do questions real quick because I know it's late on the East Coast. A friend of mine who I used to work with back in Augusta, he messaged me maybe months ago. He said, "Oh, my friend saw you at the Augusta airport and delivered content, blah blah blah." I saw the message and I want to get back to it, but I saw I'll get back to it eventually. Just all these messages. So I got back to it today, and it was a message from July. But he had sent another message since then, and he said sent another message like maybe a month or two after that first message, saying something along the lines of, "Oh, thank you for replying so fast," like a sarcastic thing. And I was like, "Look, do your best to not be offended. I get a lot of these," and just left it there because like early me was like trying to get back to every email and every DM. I quickly had to stop that. You know, I would have lost my mind. And maybe I have lost my mind, but I think I got it back.
No, it's so interesting. Like a lot of people are talking about like stuff with phones and stuff. Like I always view phones like a little more personal than email. Like I view like if you've got my phone number, like you
A
are,
little bit,
it's
yeah.
a little different. And like people don't always feel like that. Like some people at work like have their cell phone in their like signature. Like the number that's in my signature is whatever they assign me from work. I don't even know how to check half of those messages. And like, but inherently like my cell phone feels more like, oh, that's like probably a friend or a family member or something. And like, I'll get to it, or I like look and see what it is and make sure it's not like something urgent, but it feels different than email to me. But when I was super burnt out, like I also just like ignored that because inherently, like as a person who is an empath, was always pretty good at listening and got better by being trained, my phone is also full of people asking for more stuff to listen. And it's not bad. I love being that friend. Like it is inherently who I am. It is inherently my role as the fourth kid. But sometimes like if I'm spent too, I'm also like, oh, I don't want to not be a good friend. I don't want to not be a good sister. Like I need a break too. And so that can be hard too, I think.
Yeah, but I think it gives you insight into yourself because like I know that I need friends who, like I might not get back to you until like next week or 2 weeks, but I'll get back to you. And whenever I'm dating, I'll need a partner who is very understanding and also somebody who's a good listener because I have to listen so much. I need somebody to listen to me because I can't do all the listening. So it gives that insight. All right, so the fifth way to deal with your emotions and your feelings.
Yeah. So I think like, I'm not sure that you can maybe think of the better headline for this, but I think it's like, we're a constant work in progress and like expect that if you figure out what emotion you're feeling and you figure out a way to deal with it, it'll come back around. Like it's not just like gone and that's the end of it. And I think that for some reason, in part of like, we learn to approach emotions like we just won't have them. I also think we learn to like think that they like we did something wrong if they come back, or we did something wrong. Like to me, like if I used to think that like as a perfectionist, that if I was really good at my job, I wouldn't burn out. That like somebody who's good at their job can do everything and more and not be affected by it. Like somehow magically we can do all of these things and just be awesome all the time. And if you can't, then somehow that's you, right? And I've had to learn like in so many ways, like that burnout is an expectation, that having hard feelings is a part of what I do, and that I shouldn't expect they won't come. I should expect that they will and prepare for that. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense because I had that realization not too long ago where I realized that I love what I do. I love everything. I love all parts of it, but my love for what I do will push me to the brink of burnout, and then I'll be burnt out, and I'm gonna have to take a step back. So it's just more so of catching it as soon as it starts to happen and then recalibrating. But it's gonna happen, and I think when you expect it, then you don't judge yourself as much. You just realize that, oh, this is the cycle. And let me quickly adjust and get back to doing what I love doing, but prioritize myself, for at least for a brief moment in time. I like that. Ooh, I really like that. All right, so y'all, let's go ahead, take a couple of questions for Dr. Gold. I have one question for Dr. Gold, and then y'all can leave your questions in the comment section. So my question is, throughout this whole ordeal, from getting the book deal to writing the book to preparing for launch day, and then now it's Tuesday of next week, your book is coming out. What have you learned about yourself throughout this whole process? I like deep questions.
No, there's a lot of things, honestly. Like, I learned that I thought I had processed a lot of things like in real time, and I didn't. Like that, going back and thinking about some things, I learned a lot more about myself, that there's layers to processing, that it's not just like in the moment you figure it out and you're good. Like, sometimes you have to like revisit an issue and you'll learn something else. And like writing the book did that for me in a lot of ways. I think it also pulls at a lot of like overachieverness that I'm trying to like fight. You know, I can't control the fact that the news cycle right now is really hard to break through. I can't control what people choose to buy and purchase and like. And at the same time, I need to feel like there's success in something I spent 3.5 years on. And so I've been working on like what success means, right? Like how to define success outside of objective measures of success, right? Like, inherently, a successful book sells copies, right? Like, that's what there's lists, people make lists, right? But inherently that's hard, especially when there's like 30 books coming out on each day, and especially when there's an election, and especially when people are, my book's coming out at the same time as a certain first lady that is not the current first lady, and it's number one on Amazon, but maybe that's just because of purchases that are different, right? So inherently it's like all this stuff that Serenity Prayer I can't control. And so like I've really had to sit with like, what does it mean to be successful? And I think, initially my answer to my therapist on that was like, I help people with it. And she said, Jesse, that's still external. And I hadn't really thought about that, because I was like, well, isn't that the point? Like, isn't the point that like even one person gets helped by it? And she was like, sure, but it's still not like how you feel successful. Like, you're defining your success still by someone else. And so I've really like had to be like, it is a success that you wrote a book. It is a success that you taught yourself how to do like narrative writing more than you have, and dialogue writing more than you have, and you could like actually figure that out and do a pretty decent job. And it is a success that like you get to spend time with like your friends and family, and they're proud of you because they didn't write a book, right? Like, so I've had to be like, listen, like the doing it also matters. Like, we were talking a bit about sort of like the climb and the time, and I think that we just, like, as a person, you can read my CV, I'm like crazy overachiever. And so like it is hard for me to not know, like, to be able to just crack this and figure it out and win, right? Like, I'm like, I must be able to. And so I think it's really important. But yeah, I'm working on it. And I think that that's true. Like, books are one thing, right? But I think inherently all of us deal with that, which is like, there's some measure of success that might be competitive. Like, maybe someone gets an award and you don't, like, maybe somebody gets a promotion and you don't, maybe somebody, I don't know. I mean, there's just all these things that are objective, and like we still need to figure out how to be proud of ourselves, because like, just because somebody else says something like about somebody else, or something else works, like, doesn't mean yours isn't good, doesn't mean that you didn't do a lot, doesn't mean that you're not worthy or something. And I think that that's something I've been working on. You asked me a deep question. I gave you a deep answer.
Yeah, no, it's deep because it's personal to me as well. So that's why I was curious as to what your answer would be. And I like how, of course, you have a therapist, so but I like how you're the angle you're taking at this. And those of y'all with questions, we'll rapid fire and go through the questions real quick. But I like the angle you're taking at this, because when it's and I've seen your CV, it is like all these really fancy, like it's all these amazing things. And it's tough because it's like whatever we're good at and we get validation from, we do more of that, and then we tend to keep doing more and more of that, and then sometimes you lose your identity in that. So like, just on my end, like I was always like trying to do this and that and this and that and ABC and then Today's Show and then this and then that and the White House, and it got to the point where nothing was enough for me, and I'm like, this is crazy, I'm gonna lose my mind. And trying to recalibrating my mind to understand that like the doing is a success was helpful. And I'm still in the process of doing that. It's not I haven't completely shifted, but allowing myself to take pride in the do was helpful because it wasn't external. And it also kept me from the super high highs and the super low lows where it's like, all right, I'm going to feel amazing, but like if this video doesn't get enough views, like, I feel the depression in the air. So being able to work through that, it's such a hard emotion. It's just taking time. It'll take more time for me, but I think just working through that is really helpful. Like having a book that, and the cool thing about books is that you wrote the book and like now it's gone out to the world. Like it's gonna be in somebody's like living room and like they'll walk past it every day. And, like the book is there. It came from like your soul into like that's super cool.
It's like this thing's stupid, but the cover's fun.
That and also the title too. How do you feel? It because it's a question. You're like, how do I feel today?
Mm-hmm. And the you is what's important, right? Like in so many ways, like it's not just like how are you, it's how do you feel. It's like deeper than that, but it's also like, but the you is the thing, right? Like it's not just everyone else, because that's what we do.
Right. And anytime I get a chance to, I call it be selfish or like checking on myself, I take it because those chances I don't allow myself to have that as often as I probably should allow myself to have it. All right, so let's fly through a couple of questions.
I see someone say, "What's the book called?" Can you put like a link to it in your stuff somewhere?
Yes, you can get the link to the book.
Like grab an Amazon link or something.
Is Amazon the preferred?
I don't care. What's your preferred link?
Sometimes the bookstores will have like a Barnes and Noble
or if you look up like my book on Simon & Schuster, like it has like links to everything so people could decide what they want. So it's just like how do you feel? Yeah, it's just like that. Simon Schuster, how do you feel? Yeah, that way if you hate Amazon, you can get it from Bookshop or something, but it's on you. But I'm also like, you might just like your local store and you want to support them, but
I see an audiobook link. No, that's a.
Well, you would go into audiobooks already.
I know. It's like Google knows that I'm trying to do that. Not the Australian version. AU. Take that out. And then there we go. The American version. If you're watching from Australia, just put the AU instead of .com.
And Canada, there's a Canadian one too.
Oh, CA as well for all of our Canadians. So snapping. So snapping at kids, how would you say to deal with snapping at kids, Dr. Gold?
Like if you're snapping at your kids, it's usually not about your kids. It's usually about a lot more than that, Like sometimes it's like, can you take a pause before the snap? Sometimes it's you're human and you did that and you talk to your kids about it after, Like, I mean, I think it's about both, like also not beating yourself up out of that too. Like I think we think like a great parent doesn't curse in front of their kids, a great parent doesn't yell, whatever. We have all these beliefs, but like sometimes you do, and doesn't make you a bad parent. Like it just makes you somebody who is affected by life and it caused it,
Yeah.
Like the apologizing to your kids when you mess up, like inherently, like if you don't see your parents like as humans and you don't see them fail and stuff, like when you grow up, you think you can't, right? Like you also learn perfectionism that way. And I think it makes a big difference, like knowing that that happens and that, you feel bad and you feel like upset by it, and here's why, and I'm going to try not to, I'm going to work at not doing it because of this, or whatever else like that you can openly say.
Right. Okay, that's a really good answer. And I'll answer this by hearing and hearing by on my end. I don't really care. On my end, I don't lose any sleep over it. I get called worse things in the DM sometimes.
You mean like the doctor thing? Yeah, like in a patient setting, I prefer Dr. Gold for some reasons, just because like I think that boundaries, like the sort of like boundary it creates, is sometimes important just for like the making sure you
Yeah,
don't think I'm your friend, because I am like I am to you right now, and I just don't like to confuse stuff.
yeah,
So sometimes I like it in a patient setting, but like in an interview or whatever, like if Kojo told me that every time like a dude was on the show, that the whole time the dude went by doctor whatever, I would say you have to call me doctor whatever the whole time. Because then
yeah,
I would feel like I was actually minimizing my own training, because I was like, it's cool, just call me Jesse, right? But for me, like if it's equal, if we're having conversations, like my name's Jesse, like I don't expect you to call me that. I tell students, I have like groups of undergrads and things that I'm doing for work. They can call me Jesse. They're not my patients, you know. They're like in
yeah.
work with me, and like they don't need to call me if they have to, because they're from the South and they need to respect me. Like they can call me Dr. Gold if they want to, but like
It's different
I
as a South.
usually
Yeah,
say like, hey, you know, you can call me Jesse if you want, but I get that, you know, you might not be able to, and that's okay, you know.
yeah. And I do like what you said about being called Dr. Gold in the clinical setting, because especially like when you have such an affable personality, it helps to just kind of like remind, like, hey, like, I'm not your friend. Like, I'm really here to help you out. Like, we're not gonna go to Dave and Buster's afterwards and hang out. Like, we can't do that. It's not possible. How to deal with rage and anger from work. And after this, we'll take one more, and then that'll be it. Uh,
I have a lot of my baseline is anger. Have you ever been to one of those rooms where you break stuff? Like
I
I
have
did
not.
that
I'd like to be
recently,
there.
and it was really great. Like it was a
What was it
workout
called?
also. Like they're called like rage rooms, right? Like they inherently, you go for like an hour and you like break a TV.
Rage Room. I would love. I would love to do that. I would love to
And I
break it.
know that that's like such a weird answer to you, and that's not probably what you wanted as an answer, but I did it recently and it was really healing. And I think I go to anger pretty quickly, and I felt like it was really helpful to be like in a controlled space where I was allowed to be angry. Like screaming's the same way, but like you can't just scream or people come and think you need help, right? And so like having this space to just be angry in those settings that are so controlled was quite nice. Like obviously there's like you have to like pay for it some, so that's a little bit of a pain, but we did it as a retreat for work. Like I that's what I suggested, which probably means something about me, but
I would love
it
to do
is so
that.
nice. Like even watching the guy I went in there with break a TV, I liked it, and I was like, I don't know what that means about me, but I'm super into this like rage room thing. And I think like having a space to be angry, because you're not going to be able to, like, you don't want to yell at your coworkers. It's maybe not
Mhm.
about your boss, but even if it's about your boss, like that's a dangerous place to be really angry and mad. Like you can get fired.
Yeah.
So like emotions and having them are important, but sometimes you can't have them in the workplace like as much as you like. I would love to tell you you can have them wherever you want, like sometimes you can't, and so you need transition time and you need end of workday plans. So like in between meetings you can have feelings, maybe you should be able to do that. Going to work and leaving work are also really good times to go, okay, what was that, right? And like give yourself time for that. My therapist talks a lot about Mr. Rogers, and how Mr. Rogers like would come home and change his like outfit into like inside outfit, and like, you know, wearing a sweater and different shoes, and she says like, you know, it's like he took off the day. Like the day is like he has a transition to like remove the day. And like for me, like, you know, if I don't deal with how I feel with like patient after patient after patient, that's hard and hard and hard or whatever, right? Inherently, I'm going to go like eventually, oh, that was really a lot, but I'm not going to maybe notice the first day, but I might notice day 3 that all of that combined was a lot. So like having this space to be like, the day's over, like I need to take that
Mhm.
off is also important. Rage room could be one way to do it. Like listening to music in your car on your way home can be another. Like whatever it is, I think inherently like having those transitions can be big, because you can't have, the workplace isn't always the best place for a lot of anger.
Yeah, and that's a realistic answer. I like that. I'm gonna steal both of those: the rage room and change it to my inside outfit so I can just decompress. I like that. Okay, and I put the last question on here. While I'm doing that, I'm gonna go get all of the links for Dr. Gold's Instagram, and then I'll put the book up here again. So, thoughts on warning, external validation. We spoke a little bit about this, but any final thoughts on external validation and wanting it and
Yeah,
motivation?
I mean, I think inherently, like like comes from a place of that's just the way we're all raised. Like when we learn to like use the potty, they said like, here's a sticker, you went pee pee in the potty, right? Like we train you to do things for external validation, right? Like in my household, we got positive feedback. Sometimes we got allowance money for good grades. So I learned that getting A's was valued, right? And so, like, external validation is a successful behavioral modification mechanism, but it
Yeah.
also can, like, make you do certain things that you don't necessarily know that you want to do for that purpose, and you sort of start seeking it. And so, I think there's a balance between using it as a way to inspire you to do something, motivate you to do something, and a way to like thrive and exist only for that. And like, I don't know necessarily how you know it crosses over, but I think that it's important that you start to like ask yourself, like, why is that important to you? I think you might have an interesting answer to this though, Kojo, because of like social, because your social is much bigger than mine. And I think a lot of people talk a lot about sort of like social media as a source of external validation, but I don't know, maybe I'm putting words into your mouth or experience.
No, no, you're completely right. It's been a deep journey, and I mean, I've been in therapy, but I need to go back to therapy to work on this because it does something to your brain. It's definitely done something to my brain. I'm still working on it through it slash whatever, but it's done something to my brain to where it's almost like a drug. Like it's the most addictive thing I've ever been a part of, and it doesn't end. You can't get enough of it. Like there's no way to satisfy yourself with that. So it's a slippery slope. And what happens over time is that I was beginning to root my identity in it, and it was that was leading to frustration because that's not who I am. I'm somebody who does X, Y, and Z, and as a byproduct of that, I get to do whatever. But it's not my identity. But it's complicated a lot of things, just interpersonal relationships, dating for sure. So I've had to go back to who I am, what I enjoy, what my values are, and do more to root my identity in that as opposed to the external stuff because it's just too much of a roller coaster. The highs are too high and the lows are too low. So now it's like if somebody's like, "Well, you're the best of all," I'm like, "Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it." If someone's like, "Oh, your content is the worst," I appreciate it. I've learned to level myself out because I did not enjoy the roller coaster of the super high highs and the super low lows. So
Yeah,
I did,
like book reviews are similar, right? Like you put a book and like
yeah,
and even worse, a book that is personal and a memoir, and people can tell you if they like it, and then like how and it feels very much like they're saying if they like you, not just because it was your skill that wrote it, but like
mhm.
because it's actually your story, right? And so like it's its own interesting thing where you're like I have to sometimes be like, you can't control how other people receive things, perceive things, understand things. Like sometimes that's their own like lived experience contributing to the way that they are. And you did a really good job. And you are loved and you're a good whatever you need to do to kind of like
Affirmation, yeah.
recenter and like that and have some self-compassion, which is really easy not to do when you're an overachieving perfectionist who was told to like keep going, right?
In that case, I think the book is helpful for because when you put it out to the internet, they let you know exactly what they feel, how they feel about it, whether good or whether bad, and then you go through all the high highs, like the amazing comments, and then you go through the ones that are not so good, and then after that, you learn to not put stock in any of it, and it's like whatever, like it is what it is, because like I'm very grateful for social media. It's helped me break a lot of people pleasing tendencies because I realized I couldn't please them all. And then I'm like, all right, I'm out. And then I'm tapping to a level of peace that I've never had in my life ever before. And it's so liberating. So hopefully it's gonna be more good reviews than bad. But then whenever somebody says want to say, okay, I guess they can think however they want to think. Uh, it does a lot for you as a person. Well, I've been able to reframe it, but you have to look at it from that perspective, or else you're like, they don't like me for some reason. They don't like me.
Yeah. And you have to be like, it's okay. Not everybody's going to like me. The good thing is Mel from high school still likes me and hasn't seen me since high school. Like that's what matters, right? Like
Wow.
I at least she didn't go like behind my back and think about like what a crappy person I was, but I was just a nerd. But I think you know what I did do with Mel, and she can tell you about this. I did step team with them just to prove that it had diversity.
Oh wow. Okay.
They were like, hey, can you do this? And I was like, I don't really think so, but they spent a lot of time teaching it to me so I could do it at like it was really like a, again, sort of a nice challenge, but it was like I don't have rhythm like that, but I tried. I did it. I did their like performance, and Mel's one of the people who's in charge, so she can say it if she's still listening. It's super late on the East Coast though, but yeah, that was an experience that I probably have never said out loud in a long time. So now you know.
Well, hopefully Mel will catch the playback, but it's cathartic to let it out.
No, I loved it. It just was like if you're gonna think of something super challenging, like doing like step team as a person who was never a dancer and probably has not great rhythm is like a whole thing.
Yeah, I wish we had the
Video.
information, the video to watch it back.
It's possible it exists. It is called Dynasty. I'm sure they've got something, but I don't know that you want to see that.
I do. Mel, if you're watching and you can find the video, please let us know. Send it as an unlisted private link on YouTube so we can watch it playback.
Kojo would like to just watch it and be entertained.
Just watch it. My friends have like all of my embarrassing moments and all that stuff, and my brother has a photo of me before I got my teeth fixed, and like we laugh at all these things. So
yeah, it's important, right?
Focus on yourself. All right, so here's where you all can find Dr. Gold's book. Let's go ahead and pre-order it now. I will make sure that I pre-order a copy tonight. I'll let my assistant do it, so I know I won't forget. The book is going to be found in everywhere that books are sold. Right?
Yeah, it should be. You know, like if your local store doesn't have it, ask for it. They should be able to find it. If your library doesn't have it, same thing, right? Like they can get it. It's from a real publisher that they can find. So if they don't have it because they didn't plan on demand, like they can figure it out, you know?
Yeah, so the book is called How Do You Feel by Dr. Jessie Gold. It's going to be out next week, Tuesday, on October the 8th, 2024. You can pre-order it now. And I'll post about the How Do You Feel challenge on social media. And Dr. Gold, thank you so much for your time. I think we went over what I said we're gonna do.
It's so okay. I'm still awake and I'm rolling through, so we're good. And I'm honored to be here. And I always we've been social media DM friends and stuff for a while now, but it's good to be able to talk to you like in a real conversation. And like I'm always happy to do it if your folks ever want to talk again.
I appreciate and yeah, we should definitely do it. And we definitely have to have Dr. Go back for more live streams in the future. And Dr. Ranger, we'll talk about that in another live stream publishing. And Christina, actually, can you explain the challenge here?
Yeah, like so starting tomorrow through like the next Friday, I'm gonna do like a how do you feel challenge, basically to challenge us to ask ourselves how we're doing and authentically answer the question, right? And so we talked a lot about that today, but like we like to say fine and okay, and we're not. And we also don't take the time to ask ourselves. So for me, it is going to force me to do that for this entire like right close to publishing and then publishing week. But for everybody else, I want it to be something where like you do it. If you want to do it once, if you want to do it more than once, that's cool. You tag in some friends and have them do it. Like ideally you'd like shout out the book and link to that too, just because it's obviously related. But I get like just the conversation to me and is like important and enough. So like whatever that looks like.
Awesome. How do you feel? So it's How Do You Feel by Dr. Jessie Gold. Like I said, it's going to be out next week, Tuesday, at everywhere that they sell books. So Dr. Gold, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate your time. And for everybody watching across social media, thank you so much. I appreciate y'all.
Bye, friends.